Hello and welcome to the Unwatchables, a show where we talk movies, but not just any movies. We discuss what we call one-timers and no-timers. One-timers being movies that we recommend seeing at least once but are not worth a second viewing, and no-timers being movies that you shouldn't waste a moment of your lives on. Keep in mind this is a spoiler-filled podcast. I'm Kylie, and I'm here with Marcus.
Hello. So the first one we're going to talk about today is Halloween 2018, and we're calling it a one-timer. So Kylie, what were your just overall impressions of the movie in general?
Overall, I was able to enjoy it. I was scared. I thought it was suspenseful. But I do think that it sort of ripped off the old one a little bit too much, maybe one too many times. And so for that, I agree with you. I think it's a one-timer.
I feel like the movie overall, like, there's parts of it that I really like. Like, there was intense scenes, like this scene where like the friend after he tries to kiss the main girl or the granddaughter, like that scene was intense. Where he's with Michael Myers, he's in that guy's like backyard or whatever. Like that was like, whoa, this is really intense and really great. And other scenes of the film were like, I laughed out loud because it was so ridiculous. Like the scene where he kills Dr. Sertain, yeah. When he kills the doctor, like his psychiatrist, like when he stomps his head like a pumpkin. Like I laughed out loud, and I don't know if it was supposed to be a funny death. I don't know if that movie's supposed to be tongue in cheek or not. So like, there's definitely scenes in the film where it is tongue in cheek, and you know that they're going for comedy. But like, there's other scenes where it's like, this is like kind of like intense, and I don't know. It was really, I feel like tonally, the film kind of like fluctuated between being like trying to be like a funny horror film and then just a straight horror film.
Yeah, because I think there's a difference between comedic relief and a horror comedy. And with this one, I think I was laughing when I wasn't supposed to, because there was the scene where the bus crashed and this young boy with the rifle goes into the bus and he accidentally shoots the doctor.
Yeah.
And I laughed out loud, but no one else did, and I don't think I was supposed to. But I just thought it was hilarious that this young boy accidentally shot this doctor, and he goes, oh shit, and then he just runs out of the bus. And so on the one hand, you know, there's a man being shot, which is frightening and it shouldn't have happened, but then on the other hand, it's this little boy that didn't even mean to, and so I really wasn't sure if it was supposed to be comedic relief or if it was supposed to be frightening.
Well, I feel like that scene, like what you're referencing in general, I feel like is kind of like how I feel about the entire film. So I mean, like basically, so this film, it was directed by David Gordon Green, and it was written by Danny McBride, and both of them more have like a comedic background. Like Green, he directed Pineapple Express, and he did Your Highness, and he's done a lot of other like comedy related type films. And Danny McBride is almost exclusively known for comedic roles, like, you know, Hot Rod and, you know, Eastbound and Down, and he's a comedic actor. So like in that scene, for example, like what you referenced with a young hunter boy with his dad. First off, like, so they're driving down the road and the son says something about how he's like, oh, I want to dance. So he's this hunting kid that wants to dance. And I know in Red Letter Media, they mocked her. They're like, is his son basically like saying he's gay or not? Like, it's kind of really weird and up in the air. And then, but when they stop the car, like what you mentioned, like you have all these convicts that are outside the bus that have just escaped or the bus has crashed. And it's a really creepy scene. And the dad has left, right? Like he's walked outside the truck, so the boy's there alone with the gun. And that whole scene is like, it's kind of comedy, but it's like kind of scary because you said like he shoots the doctor and it's like, that's kind of funny. But then like he gets back to the truck and Michael Myers brutally murders him. So he's murdered the father and he's murdered the son, but it's like, I was just laughing and now you've killed him. So like, I just feel like tonally, like it was just really weird.
It just fluctuated a little bit too much for me.
Yeah, and like I feel like the movie, like there's just like a lot of things I feel like with this film where like I like some ideas that they like introduce, but then like they totally like don't fulfill the promise of that aspect. So like for example, like in this film, like they start off with those two podcasters or investigative journalists, whatever they are, because they say both in the movie. So it's like your thought is like, oh, these guys are gonna be like important characters in the movie, but like I don't know if they were going to do something like what they did in Psycho, where you begin the plot and like you show something for like 20 or 30 minutes and then like you totally end it and then you begin something totally different. Like that's how a lot of episodes of Simpsons are, where like the first half of the episode they introduce something and then like by the end has nothing to do with the beginning. So even with that, like with them, it's almost like, what's their existence for the plot? Like, especially like by the end of the movie, you forget that they're even in the movie. Like like the only purpose of the film is to like set up a spooky intro for Michael, and then to like give him his mask.
Yeah, that was all they did. Oh, well, I guess that they did sort of introduce Lori because they were the ones that initially went to her house, and that was her reveal on screen. But that was another thing that disappointed me about her reveal, is that all they really did was have her pull up a chair and then they showed her face, which wasn't really the reveal I think she deserved for being this character coming back after 40 years. Um, because even I think the police officer from the original film, he didn't get a very big reveal either, and I thought that that was something that they could have done to make these characters seem a little bit more important.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Like the reveal of like Jamie Lee Curtis, it's like you have her meeting them, and it's like, okay, that seemed like that was one intro, but then like when she visits the granddaughter and she's like creeping on the granddaughter the same way that Michael Myers did to her, like in the first film, it's almost like that should have been the intro.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seemed like they introduced the character twice, and it's like, what was the point of that? And I kind of a side tangent for the British podcasters or whatever. Like that girl, I almost feel like she had like one of the most like undeserved shreddings ever. Like it's one thing in horror films, you have to kill people, right? Like that's a part of it. But like, you know, typically with like horror films, they set it up where it's like, this person deserves to die, right? Or like they've done something, so it's like in your mind, you're like, oh, it's okay that they get shredded. So for this British girl, she roughly seems pretty nice. And like, they only establish that she's kind of a clean freak or a little bit of like a germaphobe. Like right when she gets into the bathroom, like she takes a paper towel and she, like the bathroom's totally disgusting and revolting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of like, you know, touches it with a paper towel. And then like, she's sitting on the on the toilet, and like not to be like too explicit, but like it looks like she's using the toilet. And then Michael Myers comes in there, like basically tries to murder her, and like her pants are down, she's crawling on the ground in this disgusting bathroom stall, and it's like, I just kind of feel like it's like, is this a little overkill? Like, does this person deserve to like die like that? It was so filthy and dirty, and then it never gets referenced ever again.
I know, it was pretty undeserved, and also I think it was a moment where I laughed, and I don't think I was supposed to, because I think a lot of girls can relate to this, that when there's little cracks in the stalls and people look in, it's really awkward. And so I laughed out loud when he was just standing there and looking through the crack, because that was funny to me. That was something that was relatable, which I think was sort of out of place for her being brutally murdered, 20 seconds later.
Yeah. Totally dead on the bathroom stall. And like, again, with this film, like kind of like consistency wise, right, this film's kind of all over the place, because when they're in the gas station, it's very intense. You're like, well, like, these guys are kind of getting murdered secretly a little bit. Like he kills like those two guys. There's the guy, the cashier, and he kills the guy that's like in the back with like the cars and stuff. And you're like, whoa, this is like a really kind of like spooky setup. But then the bathroom stuff, you're just kind of like laughing, and it's like, what the heck is this? But we kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but like the idea of like the difference between an homage versus like just a straight up ripoff. And like, for example, like this film, it's like, I get it where it's like, you're recreating scenes, like we've already mentioned, like when Laurie sees her granddaughter in school. But like this scene again, like when you mentioned about laughing, like I seriously laughed out loud. The scene towards the end where Michael and Laurie are struggling in the upstairs room, and Laurie falls off the banister and she lands on the ground. And then like I don't know what Michael does. Like Michael looks in the mirror, he kind of pauses for a second, and we see it from his perspective. And like he looks down the banister, and like she's just on the ground, right? Or she's gone. Like she's managed to disappear. And like I laughed out loud because of that scene, because it's like she's 60 years old. She doesn't move fast at all. And like I'm just thinking, I'm like, oh, this like grandmother like disappeared like that. Like it just seemed like they just wanted to do that scene because they thought it would be like interesting to recreate the scene when Michael did it in the first one. But then like in this film though, the ironic thing is that like this film allegedly is supposed to retcon everything that comes after Halloween 1. So this film basically makes it seem like everything between Halloween 2 and onwards were erased. So I think continuity wise, you get rid of like the plots of like 6 Halloweens or something like that. But like this film basically made it sound like Michael got captured that night after Loomis shot him. Cause like, you know, like Loomis shoots Michael, Michael flips off the banister at Laurie's house or whatever house Laurie was watching the kids at, and he's on the ground, right? So like it doesn't even make it spooky anymore. Like Michael got captured that night.
Yeah, but it's never explained, and then he's just in the insane asylum, or is it a prison?
Yeah, he's like in that insane asylum. Well, in the original Halloween 2, which I don't know how you can retcon this because John Carpenter directed Halloween 2. Like in original Halloween 2, they're in a hospital and Laurie is there with Loomis and Michael Myers, and Loomis explodes himself and Michael Myers. Like he literally blows them up. And we see Michael Myers comes out of the flame on fire and then he collapses. So like in this film too, that's another big homage. It's like, so at the end of the film, like, I guess Laurie's grand plot was to lure Michael Myers into the basement to explode him in the house, right? That was her big grand plan, I guess. So even that, it's like, okay, like we already saw in Halloween 2 that like Michael Myers got exploded. And then in this film, it's very ambiguous if he actually died or not. Because at least in the second film, this first sequel, I guess, you see his body is on fire and he's walking and he collapses. In this film, we just see fire around him, but we don't actually see him on fire. So it's like that's paying homage to the second film that they retconned.
Right, and I remember in that scene, he's staring up at them from the bottom of the stairs, but then there's another shot when the house is all on fire, and you see the stairs on fire and everything in the basement on fire, but he's not in there.
Yeah, he's gone.
So it's super ambiguous, and I feel like they're just using that to make another film because they were going to see if, you know, this one made money and stuff like that. So I thought it was kind of cheap. I wanted to see him die because I don't think we really need another Halloween film. I wouldn't mind it if they made a good one, but I don't see that happening.
Well, that's another thing too. Like a lot of people, at least that I've listened to reviews about this film, like they've referenced the fact that the granddaughter, like at the end of the film, like they cut to her like holding the bloody knife, and it's like, oh, is she gonna be the new Michael Myers, or is she gonna like, is she now the one that's gonna combat Michael Myers in the future? And like, I don't know, in this film, they kind of cut out a lot of, like, the supernatural elements of Michael Myers. Because, like, the Halloween franchise, at some point, gets really weird. Like, Michael Myers is, like, a part of a druid cult that gives him mystical powers, and he has to kill his own family. Because Laurie Strode is his sister. Like, it gets really weird and crazy. But, like, they've already done that subplot already of Michael having to combat, like, a new generation of Laurie's kids. So, like, because I think in one of the Halloween sequels, Michael wants to kill... Laurie has a daughter named Jamie, I think in the fourth or fifth one, and he wants to kill her. But I think he does. He fails, but then he gets her pregnant or something weird. Like, there's a lot of weirdness that eventually goes on in the Halloween franchise. And, like, for this, it's kind of like the same thing where you're like, well, you know, like, what's up with this? Like, is she... Like, it's just really ambiguous. And, like, it's also weird to me, too, that, like in this film, like the people that were killed and weren't killed and the reactions to him was also really off. Like, so when the granddaughter, like when she almost gets like assaulted by that guy, I don't know if, I don't know if like for sure what you'd call that, but when the guy makes a pass at her and he kisses her, and then she's like, yeah, stay away from me. Like, you know, you weirdo, whatever she says to him. Like, I mean, it's kind of like when he does that, you think to yourself, like, okay, this guy is, it's okay now for him to get murdered. Like when you see him get murdered, but it's so brutal. And it's just like, in my mind, I think to myself, it's like, okay, like in a traditional horror movie, like, I feel like in that scene, it wouldn't have been the friend that got killed. It would have been the boyfriend. Like, I feel like in a traditional horror film, or like more often than not, I feel like what would have happened is like the boyfriend was the good guy, which we see in the beginning of the film. And then he has some kind of heel turn where he turns into the bad guy. And then I feel like this would happen in this film. He was good and then he cheats and he's now bad. But I feel like there should have been, like, after he threw her phone in that punch, I feel like he should have been one to chase after her, like, on that street, right? And he could have had the same setup where, like, you know, she's like, leave me alone, you know, she's like, you know, you jerk, or blah, 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 right? And then, like, he tries to, like, kind of, like, you know, assault her or grab her or something like that, or kiss her, and then she pushes him away, and then she leaves, and then he gets killed. Because then you would have said to yourself, like, oh, this guy deserved it because he's, like, a really big a-hole. But that guy, nothing happened to him. He got with that girl that was like that naked lion girl. Like what kind of, he got no comeuppance at all.
I know, it seemed like the only purpose that he served was to get rid of her phone because that was a big plot point. They couldn't reach her. They didn't know where she was. which later on in the film was really weird to me because they were locked up in her house, and I guess they just assumed that the police were looking for her, but her mom and her grandma didn't seem all that concerned when they were locking up the house. Their granddaughter was still just out there.
Yeah.
And they couldn't reach her, and they didn't seem to be all that concerned with it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's because I feel like there's like, you're totally right about that. Like, I feel like this film had like, it had like two scenes, or it had two major plot elements where you're like, that's really weird that they would do that to that character in order just to serve the plot of literally like transporting things. So you're right. Like, so the boyfriend, his heel turn seems like it exists so that way they can't contact the granddaughter, right? And then later on in the film, where the new Dr. Loomis, which they even call him the new Dr. Loomis, like, you know, there's the scene where the sheriff, he sees Michael and he decides to be proactive and ram him. So he rams him with the Explorer cop car or whatever. And then Michael's on the ground, and then the new Dr. Loomis comes and kills him, right? Like, I've heard a lot of people say that the whole reason why that heel turn for the Doctor exists is that way they can transport Michael Myers to where Laurie and the Strodes are, right? And but even that's like so stupid. Like, so you have two characters in this film, the boyfriend and the professor, that have like, or the psychiatrist, that have like heel turns where they become bad guys for like no reason other than the fact that like it serves a little bit of a plot element. And like, you just don't see that a lot in movies. Like, in it, like, I feel like you could have fixed both of those issues. Like, if you want to have the boyfriend get killed, then just have him in place of the friend, like in lieu of him, right? And then like, if you want to have Michael meet up with Laurie Strode, there should have been something where like Laurie comes into town to try to find the granddaughter, or she's driving around, or like maybe after the cop car hits Michael, the car could have been damaged and the sheriff is killed, and then they call her and they're like, oh, you know, I'm at blah blah blah, come and get me, Michael's chasing after me. But like this, it was just straight up like, oh, we're just gonna like drive to Laurie's house.
I know, I would have liked to see a little bit more of a role reversal with Laurie and Michael, because in the original, he's hunting her down. He comes into that house and, you know, the climax is there. Whereas, you know, in the 2018 film, basically the same thing happens. Even though earlier in the movie, Laurie, you know, has her guns and she's hunting him down. She wants to go find him, and I wish that, you know, they had taken that direction rather than locking them up in the house.
Well, because it's like, you know, the film turns into like Home Alone. And the whole like third act or whatever, like they're just set up in the house and just waiting to murder Michael, and they got weird traps and stuff. But like, I don't, yeah, there's so many parts of this film where you're just like why is this stuff like happening the way that like it happens, and like
it just could have been done better.
Yeah, like it certainly could have been done better. And like, I think one major like plot point is that, like, it's hard when you're reviewing or talking about films that are parts of like big franchises. Like, I don't even know the number of Halloweens that have come out and the reboots and everything like that. But like, it's hard when you compare them because like, or you watch them because then you want to compare them or contrast them with other films in the franchise, right? And say, oh, this one's better than this or whatever. But I feel like in this film, like one legitimate criticism that exists in film is like the element of like, it seemed like the writer and director, they didn't know, or it seemed like Green and McBride, it seemed like they didn't know if they wanted to have it be that Michael wanted to kill Laurie, like that was an obsession of his, or not. Because like in the film, Laurie thinks that Michael's obsessed with her, and the new Loomis thinks the same thing. He's like, oh, he's obsessed with Laurie. But really, like, in all practicality, like, we never actually see that from Michael. Like, Michael literally in the film is just killing everybody in his sight, pretty much. Like, he goes from those house to house where he's killing those women. Like, he kills a woman with the hammer. Then he kills a woman that's, like, looking out her window and he stabs her in the throat, right? Like, he's just killing people left and right, kind of, like, indiscriminately. Like, thank God that one friend happened to land in the backyard because Michael was just standing in that bush for God knows how long. But, like, he's just going around murdering people. So it's like, for me, it's like, I thought to myself, when he goes to Laurie's house, is he just trying to kill Laurie because it's Laurie, or is he just trying to kill her because it's her? Or sorry, not because it's her. Like, is he just going to kill just to kill? Because like, he kills the cops, and it just seems like the plot didn't know what they wanted to do with him. Like, if they wanted to have him want to kill her, like, that's fine. But I feel like it's very ambiguous if that's actually what he wanted or not. Because like, Laurie makes it seem like he's obsessed with me, and it's like, I don't really know if he is obsessed with her. I mean, what did you think?
I really didn't know what to think, because one thing that I've always wanted to know, since, watching the original and now the new one, is I've wanted to get into the head of Michael Myers, but he never says a word and you never really know his true intentions, which granted, it does make him terrifying because he's just killing just to kill, but I would like to know his reasoning behind things because, like you said, a lot of things do happen by chance with the people that he kills.
Yeah, like, there's like no rhyme or reason to him.
Mm-hmm.
And like, why does he kill some kids but he doesn't kill other kids? I mean, like, I feel like I remember I worked at the movie theater Regal when I Am Legend came out. And it really solidified an idea in my mind that like there's certain things in film that are like taboo to show. So like in I Am Legend, there's a scene where Will Smith has to kill his dog. Like he chokes out his dog. And it's a very emotional scene because he loves the dog and the dog represents like his daughter. Like the daughter's like wish is right because like the daughter gives him a little puppy and it grows up. So that's his only companion in the world. And he has to kill the dog. But like I remember like when I was working there was a guy that came out one time and I was one of the guys ripping the tickets for that shift. And the guy said something to me. He was like, yeah, he's like, I can't believe they killed the dog. Like, that was too much for me. Like, you can't show that kind of like, this guy was really going off on me that the dog got killed. And it really kind of solidified my mind, like this idea of like what you can and can't show in film. So like in Halloween, for example, in the new one, he walks by the crib and the baby's crying, right? After he kills a one woman. And you think to yourself, like, is he going to kill the baby? And if pure evil would suggest he would kill the baby. But even they knew, they're like, oh, we can't show this because that's too taboo. Like, it's too taboo to kill dogs. It's too taboo to kill babies. And, like, I mean, which is good in a sense, but it's like, in this film, it's like, he's just walking around killing everybody. He kills certain kids. He doesn't kill other kids. And it's like, that was weird to me, too.
I think, though, that was something that they did right because you would think that he would kill a baby, but then I sort of thought more about it, and a baby wouldn't struggle. It would be too easy, and babies are more, objects when they're young, and they're not speaking or moving, really. They're things that you take care of, and so maybe he doesn't see babies as children, and it would have been too easy for him, and he likes to, kill people, adults, children that struggle,
That's a good point.
So, yeah, that was one thing that they did well. I think we should talk more about things that they did well, just because we've been ripping this movie to shreds.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely certain elements for sure where the film is like, really like terrifying. Like the scenes like where he kills a friend I thought were great. The whole end, that whole like third act after the two cops get killed in a totally outlandish way with one cop having his head cut off and a light bulb put in it. But like after that, like when they're in the house, like that was pretty intense. And like for whatever reason, Lori has decided to buy 1,000 mannequins and place them all in her house and stuff to be as absolute creepy as possible. But like that was like really cool and intense. You're like, oh, what's gonna happen here? And that was intense. And like, like that gas station scene, that was pretty intense. And like when they first meet Michael, I mean, even though I feel like the trailer gave away too much when Michael's like standing in that like checkered, like whatever, like that backyard. I mean, I know a lot of the people that are into like Illuminati are going to say, what does that mean? It was checkered, right? And he's standing. I mean, that did to me, like kind of my Illuminati radar went off. I'm like, why is he standing on like a checkered board tied to a cement block? Mm-hmm. That's the only way they could let him like bait out and free. And there's other people tethered to little cement blocks too. But like that scene was pretty cool. There are definitely like cool like stretches of this film where you're like, oh, that is pretty cool. And I feel like this movie, like obviously there's like three major audiences for this film. There's the people that are like in their 60s or like late 50s that watched the film when it first came out. And then you have people that are like younger than that like watched it growing up, like their parents showed it to them. And then you have like the teenage audience now, which just watch horror films. So I feel like this film kind of has like a big audience that they're trying to pull from. So if you do like horror films, I think you would like this. And I mean, we don't really see a lot of slasher films. Like this film is completely, it gets rid of the supernatural. So it really is just a slasher film where he's just a human man just killing. But like, yeah, I mean, there's other elements too where like, because when I first watched the film, I thought to myself, I'm like, oh, this was pretty good. And then, the next couple of days, I kind of thought about it more. I'm like, God, there's just so many things where like, this seems so stupid. But overall, I mean, I think you would like it for one-time viewing, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's definitely very visually pleasing, at least for me. You're going back to that insane asylum scene where they're out in the courtyard. There's a super close-up shot, they have this big yellow line that you're not supposed to cross, and there's this close-up shot of one of the podcast people, and he just barely crosses a toe over the line. And it's just little shots like that. And I really wanted to commend the lighting producers, because there is the scene where there's the woman in her living room and he goes in to kill her. But just before, he looks in, and all you can see in the reflection of the window is the mask. You can't see his body, you can't see the camera at all. It's just perfect. You can only see his mask. And I love that shot, and that was a super, super brutal scene that was really suspenseful, which I enjoyed. And then there were also subtle things that I really liked, along with the shots. I think the really subtle homages that they made, like his heavy breathing, that was a staple. His mask, of course, and his weapon of choice. You know, he goes into the kitchen and he picks up the knife, and he uses it throughout the rest of the film. So the subtle things like that I really enjoyed, that I picked up on.
No, I mean, I like those things too. I mean, it would have been ridiculous if he was killing everybody in the film with a hammer. Mm-hmm. Like, it just would have been so out of his character.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I think for this film, yeah, I would definitely... I think it's a one-timer. I think if you're a fan of Halloween, though, this is probably, I think, the best entry you could ever want. Like, I think this is better than the first one, even. And the second one, there's definitely cool elements of the second one, but I think this is better than the second one. And I've only seen parts of the other one, so I think if you're a Halloween fan, you're never going to get one better than this. So you might as well just be happy. And if you're a normal, non-Halloween fan, I think you're just gonna think it's all right.
I think you'll still enjoy it as a horror film, given the suspense and whatnot. And if you're a fan of special effects, the dead bodies in this scene are extremely gory, extremely detailed. So I think they did well with that. You know, it's your opinion really if you enjoy that intense gore, but you have to give them credit. It was pretty realistic and disgusting.
I'll say one more thing too. I mean, I agree with you, and I feel like this film, I just kept thinking, like, when they showed the dead bodies in places, I kept thinking, like, man, this is gonna look good as a maze at Fright or Horror Nights, like, at Universal, like, in the next year or two. Like, there's so many good scenes for that.
Yeah, they were really creative with it. There was the one scene where the man died and his jaw was just open on the table, and I hadn't really seen that before. And the dad that died next to the bus, and his head was just bent backwards, and he was all broken. Brutal. Yeah,
the scene where when the boyfriend is like, just like pinned to the wall.
Yeah,
I know for sure that will be at Horror Nights. There'll be the Halloween maze, because the last several years they've done Halloween. At least the last 2 years they did Halloween 4. So like I know that they will do this Halloween eventually. It will be a maze, and they're totally gonna use that scene. Like they're gonna have a scene where he goes in the kitchen and you're gonna see the woman with her head bashed in, and they're gonna do one where the boyfriend is pinned to the wall.
Oh yeah, they definitely have new material for that. The next movie that we're going to talk about is Minions, which is a super obvious no-timer, I think, for anyone that's seen it. I think that the entire existence of this movie is offensive, and I don't think that anyone should ever watch it, even children. I just think that one of the worst things about this movie is that you have no real clear protagonist. There's the one minion, Kevin, that's sort of the leader, but they're a group. And what's worse is they're this big group of characters that don't speak English, which is one of my least favorite things, because they can comprehend English and they speak a few English words. So what's the point? Why don't they just speak English? What about you? What's your least favorite part of this film?
There's a lot of dislike about this film. Like I watched this film with a friend, like when it first came out, and I got free tickets to see it because he got me into the movie theater. And literally, like, I leaned over the person I was watching it with at one point. I was like, do you want to leave? And like, I only didn't leave because like, I just kind of thought to myself, like, I don't know if she wants to. And then I was thinking like, I don't want to like burn my friend because he got the tickets for me. But like, I legitimately thought the movie was awful. Like, because it came out after Despicable Me 2, but before Despicable Me 3. And I liked Despicable Me 2. And I was like, oh, maybe this could be okay. And then you just watch it, and you're just like, there's just nothing to get out of it. I mean, I guess the only thing you could say is the CG was good for that year, I guess. Like, it looked okay, but the characters are just so obnoxious. And like, well, you mentioned the talking thing. Like, when you're a side character in a film, or you're not the main characters, like how they are in Despicable Me 1 or 2, it's funny for like a 1 minute stretch where you have three guys just basically like just mumbling, like, just like kind of that loud yelling. It's fine in like 1 or 2 minute stretches, but like when you stretch it out and it's the course of the whole film and they're talking to each other like that, and they're not talking to, because at least like in Despicable Me, they're talking to Gru, or they're talking to like the Doctor Nefario or whatever. So it's like they're talking and he's talking back. It's almost like in like Star Wars where like you have like a Chewbacca. Like if you had a whole film that was only Wookiees and no human talking back to them in English or whatever, android or whatever, alien, you would just hear Wookiee yells the whole film, and that wouldn't be a movie. That's just like you're just watching animals talk, and that's what Minions was to me with how they spoke.
Yeah. There was just absolutely no charm to them anymore, because I did like the first and second Despicable Me's, and the Minions are definitely skit characters. You can make short movies with them, and they're fun here and there throughout the movies, but when you have the whole movie just being Minions, they just remove any parts of the plot that could possibly make sense, and they just replace it with goofiness and just extreme silliness and things that I don't even think as a child I would have laughed at, really. It's all just dumb, and, they have, like, fart jokes, and just, it's so...
They even have a fart gun.
Exactly, and it just made me so sad that Sandra Bullock agreed to be in this film, like you said earlier, probably just for the money, but it was just really disappointing because I do love her as an actress, and putting her in this ridiculous, demeaning film where nothing made sense, and it was just horrible overall, really upset me.
Yeah, I mean... I feel like if you look at like the first Despicable Me and even the second one, like the overall plot, like what the film is actually trying to convey to you is this idea of like a man kind of like being caught up in his work a lot and being a bad guy, and then like basically being redeemed by having kids, right? And that's literally the plot of the first one. Like he's evil, adopts kids, and becomes good, right? So I mean, I know that the first plot is they're trying to move the moon or whatnot. Like, that is just totally secondary. Like, the actual character development of Gru is that, like, he's learning how to... Like, it's basically, like, the girls have transformed his heart, right? And the second film is basically him allowing himself to love a woman because, like, he has all these, like, mommy issues. And I know that that's, like, more in the background, and they don't really, like, drive it home necessarily in every scene, but that's really the subtext of the film, right? In Minions, like, there is no subtext. There is no underlining thing. Like, the Minions, like, we don't know if they have a gender, or if they do have a gender, we don't know what it is. Like, they're not in love with other Minions. I mean, there's a scene where the Minion he's attracted to a fire hydrant, but like, it's too far. I mean, this scene where, like, okay, like they reference or they foreshadow, or he looks at the fire hydrant after it's been peed on, and he was like, ooh la la, right? And then like later on in the film, he's in the hot tub with the two fire hydrants, and it's like, obviously you could play that up for comedy, and it's fine if there's a main plot going. But like the B plot for Minions, there, like the B plot and the A plot, there's no actual plot. Like, I mean, there's no like, oh, we have to do this to save our kind, or we have to do this because, my brother was Kevin or something like that, and I want to do blah blah blah. There was none of that. There was literally they're looking for an evil master, and then like their first one, they have a really bad breakup with, and then they meet Gru. Like, what kind of plot is that? Like, we were talking about Sandra Bullock's character, the Scarlet Overkill or whatever. Like, it's like, there's, what kind of, yeah, it's just really weird. Like, they don't gain anything as characters when they're interacting with her. All they get from her is just, like, a lot of weird drama. And then they kind of, does she get killed off at the end, or, like, arrested?
She's just frozen in the block of ice.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, Gru froze them, and then he just takes the crown. And no one's trying to go after him or anything except for the Minions because, now they're in love with him.
Yeah.
But
he's like the new, like, yeah, he's the new, like, cute girl in school.
Exactly.
It's Gru. And it's, so what's the, like, yeah, there's, like we were talking about, there's no redemption. They meet a new relationship.
There's just no subtext. And it's impossible because you have all these characters that don't speak English. Yeah. And so there's just such a lack of depth. And the only stakes, the narrator says it in the beginning of the film, is that they're all just depressed, and if they don't find a new leader, they'll die, but it doesn't really say why, and so they're all just going to die of depression, I guess. But throughout the rest of the film, the stakes are so low, even though they seem really high, because Kevin, he survives a bomb exploding in his mouth when he's this huge giant. And then there's the scene where they're supposed to be tortured by Herb, her sidekick. And
like a sidekick husband or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and he tries to hang them, but they don't have necks. What did he think would happen? They just fell right out and they started all playing together.
Yeah.
And, they've been alive since the dawn of time, apparently. Their first boss was a T-Rex or something. And so, obviously, they're immortal. They can't be killed. What are the stakes? There's no point of this movie.
Yeah, and like what you mentioned, like they're depressed. They need to find a new leader because of that. But like, they've been alive for millions or billions of years, however long they've been alive for this whole time. So like, I mean, to them, I mean, what's a little depressed for 30 years when you live forever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole point of this movie, I guess, just served to be their origin story for finding Gru. Which was pointless.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it's exactly like, I mean, I was thinking about this film earlier, and like in the comparison to like Solo, the Star Wars film, where it's like, like Solo answered all the questions that like you never cared to have answered. It's like, how did he get his name, or how did he meet Chewbacca, or how did he do this, how did he do that? It's like, no one cares. And like for this, it's like, how did Gru meet the minions? It's like, who cares? I mean, that'd be like them making a Frankenstein movie where the Dr. Frankenstein meets Igor. They did that movie, and it was sucked. It was a movie with Daniel Radcliffe and James McAvoy. I saw it. I can't remember the name of it, but like, when films want to answer questions that no one's asking you, then that means that like no one cares to see the movie, I think. In this film, like what you're mentioning, like, it's like, oh, so that's what and they're making a sequel. Well, what is the sequel going to be? And like the crazy thing about Minions is like, it made over $1.1 billion, right? It's the highest grossing film in the Minions franchise. But in my opinion, like, because when I was researching this film, like before this recording, like I thought to myself, like, oh, they must have got a different director and writer to do Minions, because it seems like they didn't really know the material that well from Despicable Me. They just knew Minions. But it's not the case. The same guy directed Despicable Me 1, 2, and Minions. Like, this is the guy that created it. And like, that's another thing too, like a lot of times in film, right? Like the director and the writer, they will have asked themselves questions about the character or the plot, like that's never even shown on screen. So that way, like they know in their minds, like, oh, this character wouldn't do that because he has this in his background, even if it's not explicitly told to the audience during the film, right? So like basically what I'm saying is like a lot of times actors and directors, they know all this background that's not shown, right? So in my mind, I think to myself, that means that the writer director, the guy that made Minions, he must have had an idea of where Minions came from when he made Despicable Me 1. Like, he had an idea, like, oh, the Minions come from this, or they do that, right? And, like, he must have already had an idea in his mind how they met Gru. And, like, is that what he thought when he made Despicable Me 1? He thought the Minions hook up with Gru after Gru steals the crown from the Queen of England? Queen Elizabeth? Is that what he actually thought?
I think that he just pulled it out of thin air, honestly, because of the lack of substance of this film. And the thing is, like, there was so much filler in this movie that there was barely any plot. So, for instance, they had, and I timed it, there was a 4-minute long montage where Bob is crowned king because he pulled the sword out of the stone. Which is just so stupid on its own, and I get that it's a kid's movie, but why would a minion ever be the king of a country? And it took up 4 minutes of the film, and then there's also just a bunch of filler scenes where the whole mob of minions are trying to make their way to England, and, there's just, like, 20-second long scenes of them just being pulled by a boat, and it's all just filler, and, yeah, the lack of substance really bothers me, because usually in kids' films, they teach you an important life lesson, about family or, love and things like that. But there was just absolutely none of that in this movie.
I mean, talk about that a little bit more, like the idea that like what would be some other examples of like some popular kid films that actually do have a message that is kind of played off a little bit, like maybe not like bashing over the head, but just actually do have subtext.
Well, for example, I guess the first one that came to my mind would be Beauty and the Beast, where...
Yeah, exactly. That's a great one.
Yeah, because, he is a beast, and it's not exactly realistic, but she's loving someone not based on their appearances, but for, who he is. And also throughout the film, she's teaching him how to be more human. And figuratively, not just literally. And it's beautiful because, you know, he's learning how to love, and she's also learning how to love someone that, you know, is not super handsome and he's a beast.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're right. Like a lot of like originally a lot of these like children's story or stories for children, like they do have that kind of like that subtext, right? Or it's like, you know, for example, oh gosh, I was thinking Goldilocks, but I can't even think of what the moral of that story is. Like perfect, like Aladdin, right? Like Aladdin has a little similar plot of like Beauty and the Beast in the sense that like here's Aladdin, guy really down on his luck, but because he has like this heart of gold, like he basically overcomes this really like insurmountable situations, right? And he ends up being a hero. And like, I mean, if you look at like a lot of these other stories too, like there's the like what's happening in front of you plot, and then there's like what's happening developmentally with the characters. And yeah, it's like with Minions, you don't like see that really. I mean, you're right. Like a Beauty and the Beast, it's very clear cut where it's like Beast has literally like in the beginning of the film when Belle meets Beast, he like literally and figuratively is living like an animal. Like he looks like an animal and he lives like an animal and he behaves like one. And then at the end of the film, he's like extreme makeover home edition. At the end of the film, he's gone from being this beast into being a person that is actually compassionate and caring. I mean, he also does become a very beautiful guy and he's rich, so it doesn't hurt him. But like for his character wise, so it is, he's like actually he's become human now. Like the Belle has literally transformed him in from being an animal to a man, right? And yeah, I mean a lot of these other stories too. A lot of like Toy Story 3, you know, for example, like that whole plot really existed to show that like how, especially like Toy Story 3, because like the first one came out like in the like 97 or 96. Like it basically helped, like when the third one came out 2010. Yeah, 2010. So there's like 13-year gap. So like you actually see these kids kind of grow up with Toy Story. So by the time Toy Story 3's come out, if you were a kid when the first one come out, now you're like in your late teens or 20s. So it kind of played up that sentimental value, and it kind of showed like, oh, you know, like, you know, you can grow up and it's hard to let things go, but you kind of have to do these things. And then there's a new beginning because in Toy Story 3 they hand off the toys to that little girl.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like Minions, there's none
nothing. Of that. And you could even take something that's even less clear, like take Jungle Book for example, and the message isn't super clear, but you know, you can tell that the wolves are his family, and these animals in the jungle, they're his family, which, you know, just plays into the lesson that it's not the people that made you, but it's, you know, who you're with, who you can pretty much choose your family, you know, and who loves you, and you can choose who you love. Whereas Minions, I tried to find the subtext of the plot. I tried to find the meaning of this film, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I don't think it's there. And the jokes, they're so juvenile, and they're so stupid, and the action is just so like what?
I know. Why? And there's also another thing that I noticed is there's so many just casual deaths in this film.
Oh yeah.
They're at the villain con, and I think it's Bob. He comes up to this booth, and there's this evil villain that's invented time travel, and so he has all these versions of himself from the future, and they accidentally kill the original, and then they all just are running around and they're dying, but it's played off as just a funny scene with comedic timing and everything. And let's see, there is another scene where I think one of the giant like yetis or something, this huge block of ice just falls on his head and he falls backwards.
Oh yeah.
And then the scene's over, and it's just so casual, and like, how is that going to be numbing for kids? Are they just going to look at death, you know? I mean, obviously they're not going to think it's funny, but it's not going to be considered as serious.
Well, it's weird, like, because you're right, because it's like, you know, like older cartoons, some people would say like, oh, well, you know, when I was a kid, cartoons are so much tougher, and they are tougher, you know, in the olden days compared to now. But it's like, let's say for example, you look at like Looney Tunes, and there's a lot of slapstick, you know, somebody Sam gets shot in the face point blank, but like he's alive. He just has like the black like gunpowder on his face, but he's alive. Like he's literally not dead. And like a lot of those older cartoons, like Tom and Jerry, I mean, like brutalizing each other, or I guess Tom is primarily getting brutalized, but like he's not actually ever dead. Like you're right, Minions, like they actually die. Like that guy, like when they're running around, like what you said, like he's dead.
Exactly.
Like, he's not alive anymore.
And they just show his dead body too on the screen. He's just all crumpled up because he got hit in the head with this giant like nuke or something.
Yeah.
Oh, another thing that I noticed is a lot of the shots, they seem to be catered to a 3D viewing, but it didn't start happening till about halfway through the film when they're in London and they're in this like chase scene and everything, which was just super random because then after, I guess you'd call it the second act, it stopped. So it was really only in the middle of the film, and so that was another random thing that I didn't enjoy about it, because all the other shots were just purely two-dimensional and not that interesting.
Well, I think like Minions, I feel like the movie came out like right as like the trend of 3D IMAX films were kind of dying down a little bit. I mean, I know there was a lot of films like in like early 2010 and 11 that were converted to IMAX 3D that weren't ever actually filmed like that. But you're right, yeah, Minions. Universal just told Illumination, who was the studio that created the Minions film in Despicable Me, they just basically told them like, yeah, just put that in 3D so we can play the movie in 3D and sell the tickets for more money.
I just thought that was pointless, and honestly, like, one of the biggest takeaways that I had is that I just feel so bad for the parents that are being dragged to this movie because their kids love Minions, because of the lack of the plot, lack of the dialogue. I think kids can definitely find humor in the stupidity, but there's just really nothing for the parents, you know? There's really, really subtle nods. There was the moment when they rolled up to New York and there was that big billboard that said, "Finally, someone you can trust," and it said Nixon.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, but there's just such a lack of that and a lack of references that it really didn't matter. I just feel so bad for the parents that were dragged to this film.
Like, I feel like even like when I was a kid, like you raised a totally good point. Like when I was, like 9 or 10, like I would have thought this movie was so stupid. Like I don't even know. Like I guess the target audience is like
4 or
2-year-olds to 6-year-olds. Yeah, I mean like, because it's so slapsticky and it's so just like juvenile, I guess you could say. Like, I mean, all the points you're talking about, like the fact that like they're not speaking English, there's no consequences, and like even their designs. Like, I mean, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but like I just don't like their designs. Like the facts that like I don't like the fact that there's like not a lot of consistency. Like I get it that like in this film, because this, for visual humor, you kind of have to have, like, if you're gonna have 3 characters in this visual humor, there's got to be the tall guy, there's got to be like the fat guy, and there's got to be like the average size guy, right? Like that's a very common trope. I don't have a problem with that necessarily, but like design wise, like some of them have 2 eyes, some of them have 1 eye, and like even stuff like that kind of bothers me. Like I don't like what they look like.
Yeah, along with that, you said earlier you can't tell their gender, and another thing about them is you never really know their intentions.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to this, that they can't speak English, but it's just such a dominant issue with the film because you can't really tell. They're in league with this evil villain, but then they're kind of against her because she turns into the antagonist. Evil. Yeah, and so it's just this really weird line that they keep crossing, and you have no idea really what's going on, and because obviously they do want to serve a villain, but you have no idea what their intentions are with the grander scheme of things.
I mean, you raise an incredibly good point, and that's that. I mean, for them, like they're not even that mischievous. Like they're somewhat, but like they're not little a-holes. Like like Nightmare Before Christmas, those 3 little kids that save Oogie, or that capture Santa Claus. Like they're little a-holes. Like they're little jerks, and like they're very mischievous, and like you kind of want to see them get punched in the face, but like they're little jerks. Minions, though, they have like they're shown off like they have hearts of gold.
They're just stupid.
Yeah, they're just stupid, but they're looking to team up with bad guys to do bad guy stuff. So it's very, like, I mean, that, like when they're hitchhiking, right, and they hook up with that family is like they're like evil. Like, right? Like they're doing the police chase and they're shooting at police, right?
Yeah, and the minions accidentally set off that bazooka or something, and the police definitely died because the water tower fell and they all crashed into each other, so they're definitely dead, and the family's going, yeah, awesome, but they did it by accident, and because everything that they do is so accidental, they might as well just not even have intentions. They just serve to be ridiculous.
I mean, gosh, I wish I could remember the guy's name. Robert. Oh man, I'm totally gonna forget about this, but there's like the really famous screenwriter. Like he was even portrayed in the film adaptation by Brian Cox. But like I've listened to a number of his lectures, and he talks about the idea of like, plot and what's happening. And like from Minions, you have characters that have no motivation. They can't speak English. They have like there's no drama in their lives. Like the screenwriter guy, he talks about that where he's like, you can't have a film without drama. Because like there's a scene in adaptation where Nicolas Cage just asking him, he's like, oh, I'm writing a book about this orchard, the orchard thief, and he's like, but nothing happens in the book. There's nothing. Like, literally, this book about the orchard thief is about like orchards and just looking at them. So he's like, nothing happens in that book. And Brian Cox's response is like, well, he's like, drama happens in real life every day. There's something happening, and I just feel like if you apply that principle to Minions, it's like things are happening, but you've missed the whole like. You don't have any character. There's no character. There's no drama. There's no real plot. There's nothing. There's no desire. The characters, they have a desire of hooking up with the bad guy, but their desires are very muddled because when they find out that the bad guy is really bad, then they don't want anything to do with her. Mm-hmm. So like, there's no motivation. There's really, like everything you said, it's completely spot on. There's no point for them to do anything.
Exactly. They're completely pointless because they're side characters that require a leader. And the whole plot of this film is that they don't have a leader. Yeah. So what are they supposed to do? Just be ridiculous minions. And that's about all they do for the entire film.
Like, this movie would have worked so much better. I know that they've made, like, Minions shorts, but, like, this film would have been so much better as a short. Mm-hmm. Like, a 15-minute Minions take New York in the 1960s. Like, that could have been kind of funny. They see a hippie playing, or, like, there's some kind of nod to, like, Bob Dylan playing the guitar and there's somebody holding a sign. Like, those kind of things would have been funny for 15 minutes. But this was like I literally, like, I got like I remember watching the film, like, I got like a headache. I felt exhausted. I felt like you know, like sometimes like you go to like a Chipotle or something and you think you're gonna die afterwards. Like, I almost had that from my mind though. Like, the intake, like, it was just very like mind numbing and exhausting.
It's really exhausting because if you've traveled to other countries, you know, you're constantly surrounded by people that are speaking other languages and you're struggling to understand people. And that's basically what this whole film was, because they're characters that are not speaking your language. And so it's exhausting for your mind to be continually listening to it and trying to understand what they're saying. But you literally just can't. Yeah. And so it's super exhausting in that regard.
I think you're totally right. I mean, I will certainly say for this film, I mean, unless you worked on this film, I don't know why you would want to watch this. This was awful. It was bad. It's certainly a no timer. It's just, I don't think there's any redeeming elements of this film at all.
Absolutely none. I agree completely.
I will make sure to join us next week for another no timer and one timer. All right, thank you for listening.